All right, so Hurricane Milton, right? It's like, seriously, can we get a break from hurricane season already?
Tell me about it.
And, sometimes you just got to go deeper than the headlines, especially when it's something like this that's still unfolding.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got a ton of news, social media stuff, all about the aftermath. And I think that's what we're here for, right? To cut through the noise and try to figure out what's really going on.
Exactly, yeah.
So, Milton.
Well, the thing about Milton is it kind of felt like it was going to pull a fast one on us.
Yeah.
Like, it went from a Category 4 to a 1 almost overnight as it was crossing over Florida.
Right.
And you might think, oh, okay, well, dodged a bullet there. But not so fast.
No. ABC, BBC, CNN, they're all saying the same thing. Slams into siesta key and then poof, just sort of loses steam, loses the wind speed.
Right, but see, that's the thing about those hurricane categories.
Yeah.
They're mostly focused on the wind.
Right. Just the wind.
So it doesn't necessarily mean the danger has, disappeared.
Just because it's not blowing as hard doesn't mean it's not bad, right?
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Like, just because it's a slap and not a punch doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, right?
Right.
The damage often comes from what that wind is pushing around the storm surge, the flooding.
Oh, yeah.
And Milton definitely brought those.
Wow.
Plus, we can't forget about those tornadoes. I mean, St. Lucie County, what WFTV's been reporting on.
Oh, man.
You can't call that a minor event.
No. And speaking of St. Lucie County, you found some pretty intense firsthand accounts on Reddit, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's one, I think somebody described it as like a bomb went off.
Wow.
After those tornadoes, just debris everywhere, houses just totally...
Just leveled.
Yeah. It's just heartbreaking,
It's different than seeing it on a map, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, there's just no comparison. And it's not just St. Lucie County either. WFTV is reporting, I think it's over 3 million people without power across the state. Think about that for a second. Hospitals struggling. Businesses are closed. Food is probably spoiling in this heat. I mean, this is not just an inconvenience. It's a crisis.
It's massive. It's hard to even wrap your head around 3 million people without power. And then on top of it, you've got the Florida heat.
Brutal. And this is where, you get those raw accounts from social media, especially TikTok.
Yeah.
Because it just makes those numbers real.
Oh, yeah.
You see a video of somebody wading through knee-deep water in their living room, begging for help, and it hits you.
Yeah.
This is not just a statistic. This is somebody's life.
Right. This is their reality.
Totally.
You sent me this one TikTok from Palm Beach County, and I gotta say, seeing someone's house flooded like that, it just hits different, And it's different than a news report. This is someone's life.
It's just, we haven't really seen that before, this whole new level.
Right.
And it just, like you said, those desperate pleas for help, it kind of lights a fire under everyone to get things moving right. Which brings us to Governor DeSantis.
Right, because in the middle of all this, he's got to project some kind of control, right?
Right.
So we see the briefings, we see deploying the National Guard, utility crews. They're working around the clock.
Right.
But like you said, 3 million homes.
Yeah.
That's not a quick fix, even if everyone's doing their absolute best.
Yeah, absolutely not. And that's the thing that we forget, right? We see these images, these horrible stories, I lost everything, but we don't think about the long-term effects.
Right.
The mental toll this takes,
Yeah.
the economic hit. I mean, that stuff lasts for years.
Years.
So DeSantis and those crews, they've got their work cut out for them for a long time.
Yeah, this is a long game, right? It's like the storm is just the first punch, and then what comes after, putting lives back together, that's the real fight.
It is.
And, one thing that really struck me is these intense hurricanes, they're not going away, are they? They're getting more frequent.
Right. This is, unfortunately, it's the new normal.
Yeah, this isn't a one-off. This is a pattern.
And that's where I think we have to kind of take a step back and look at the big picture. How do we adapt to this? Not just cleaning up the mess, but how do we adapt to living in a world where these storms are just more and more ferocious?
Right, because we're pretty good at the during, right?
Yeah.
We know how to board up. We know to have our emergency kit. We know, all that stuff. But how do we as a society get better at the before and the after?
Exactly.
Especially now that we're seeing it, These firsthand accounts, they're right in our face. We can't ignore it anymore.
Right. And it's more than just building stronger houses, or having enough supplies, although those are obviously really important. It's thinking about where we're building, like those vulnerable areas. Do we need to rethink how we approach development,
Right.
investing in infrastructure that's actually going to be more resilient, having a plan for what happens to the economy, to people's mental states after one of these things hits. That long-term stuff.
Totally. Like, I don't know, maybe instead of just rebuilding the same beachfront condos that get wiped out every time, we take a step back and think, how do we coexist with this?
Yeah.
With these more powerful storms?
Right. We need to stop thinking of this as, oh, this is a crazy event. No, we need to start preparing for a future where this is common.
Right.
And that's not just on, the government or institutions. I mean, this is on all of us too, right?
Okay, so knowing all of this, what do we do individually as a society? Because you're right, this is on all of us now. So we know these storms are getting worse, and we know that the impact goes way beyond just a few days without power.
Right.
What's the takeaway? What can people actually do about it?
Well, I think the good news is awareness is the first step, right?
Right.
Like you're here, you're digging into this stuff. That's huge.
Yeah.
But you're right. It can't just stop at knowing.
Right.
So individually, having a solid emergency plan, knowing your evacuation route if you have to get out of Dodge, that stuff's still crucial, right?
Yeah.
But how about this? Next time you're voting in a local election, look at those candidates. What are their stances on climate change? What about disaster preparedness?
Oh, interesting.
Because that's where it really matters, right?
Yeah, it's easy to feel powerless when it's Mother Nature, right?
Right.
But the choices that we make, the things that we do, they impact how prepared we are.
Absolutely.
And, one thing I was thinking about, seeing all this stuff about Hurricane Milton, all those firsthand accounts,
Yeah.
it makes it real, for people who haven't necessarily lived through something like that.
Yeah.
It's like these TikToks, these Reddit posts, they really humanize the statistics in a way that, I don't know, we haven't seen before.
Totally. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot, actually. I mean, social media, it has its downsides, but
For sure.
I think it has the potential to be a real turning point for this kind of thing.
Interesting.
It's not just about spreading awareness. It's about building empathy.
Right, right.
When you see a video of a family and they're huddled in their attic and the water's coming up around them,
Oh, man.
it hits differently in a way that a news report just can't.
It's like this visceral, it's like this wake-up call.
Exactly.
And maybe that kind of visceral understanding is what will actually lead to change. It's one thing to know something, right?
Right.
But it's another thing to feel it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes people act.
100%.
Yeah.
And the more we can do to close that gap
Mm-hmm.
between information and actually understanding,
Yeah.
the better off we're all going to be,
Right.
individually and as a society.
Yeah.
Not just dealing with whatever Mother Nature throws at us, but
Right.
everything, right? The climate crisis, social inequality.
It's all connected.
We need that same kind of forward thinking. We got to get ahead of it.
Yeah. Well, on that note, folks, it's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
We are.
And I think that's something we need to hear more of, especially these days. So, to everyone listening, let's take those stories from Hurricane Milton to heart. They've got a lot to teach us, not just about getting through a storm, but about building a future that's going to be okay. Because if we just have knowledge and don't do anything with it, well, that's just a bunch of hot air, isn't it?
It is.
And we've had enough of that from hurricanes for 1 year.
I think that's enough. Yeah.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Until next time.